All right, dudes, we are live for another Pangburn Hangout. Today we're going to be talking about psychological harm. Mondays are our psychology days, and Alexander is our psychological advisor at Pangburn, and he's also a Pangburn skeptic and philosopher, and we are so happy to have him. His day job, he practices as a therapist, and yeah, we like having conversations about issues that pertain to psychology and clinical psychology. And so if you like talking about this topic, consider hanging out with us on Discord. We are live on Discord right now. And if you want to join in and you're not familiar with Discord, all you have to do is, I'm going to give you guys a link right now. Generate new link. And if you're seeing this later, that's okay too. You can still do this. I'm going to give you the link. Sorry, I got a few pages open here. Here's our link. You can click that and you will find the voice chat section with Pangburn and Alexander underneath it. And that's where you'll find us. And you just click on the room and you'll be on the air with us. So if you want to join the conversation, please do so, whether it's this one or any other conversations we're having. A couple announcements here. On the screen, you'll see The Physics of Climate Change by Lawrence Krauss. This Friday, we are doing a Q&A with Lawrence Krauss that you can engage in. You can be there and be involved. If you've ever wanted to ask Lawrence Krauss a question, I'm sure he would be fine with some general physics questions. Classical mechanics, maybe quantum mechanics, whatever you want to ask them, I'm sure would be fair game. So that's this Friday at 5 p.m. Pacific, and it takes place on our Discord. And one thing you do have to do is sign up as an official Pangburn subscriber through the website. So you just go to pang-burn.com/subscription. And there's a little video there I put up just to help you understand what the subscriber program is and what you get with it. It also includes a one-on-one with me, which would be like a philosophical coaching session. And by that, all I mean is we would just engage in a cool conversation, and we could do it about your life if you would like. But that all comes with the subscription, and you can actually use that once a month. So that's the Q&A. It's happening this Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific. With none other than Lawrence Krauss. The Physics of Climate Change was an excellent book, very data heavy. You need to take your time with it if you're not familiar with classical mechanics, physics in general. You're going to want to take your time with it. Don't rush through it, or else you're going to get to the end of the book and you're going to say, "Well, I remember a few of these lines he put." Maybe take some notes while you're going through this book. Yeah, it all happens really fast, and Lawrence talks about these, like, let's say the fundamentals of classical mechanics, like it's kind of common knowledge, but it's not really common knowledge to, the average population, the general population. So, take your time with it, but it's an awesome book, and please take advantage of being in the same room with Lawrence Krauss this Friday. And and then you'll get to know Discord a little more as well, and the community we've built, which is just an amazing community. Everyone on our channel knows that one of the main rules is that you engage in good faith discourse, and we hardly ever have problems. A few people will stop by and do some hilarious trolling, which I think it makes me laugh. I like it. Besides that, we have some awesome conversations, and some are impromptu, and then some are more scheduled, like this one we're going to have today. So please join us. You got the links everywhere to join our Discord, and Discord is a really good way to get more connected with what we're doing at Pangburn. And there's a lot of new things happening. Also on the screen, you will see it's kind of phase 2 now for the warofideas.org. Phase 1 was just to beta test and massage things out, and we've got some really cool posts, some awesome articles on the website. So go to thewarofideas.org, make an account, enter the battlefield. That's what we're looking at on the screen right here. We're just taking a look at the battlefield. Does some really cool posts. Michaela Miller, you guys know Michaela. She's done so much work for the Pangburn brand and is such a strong force, a positive force for Pangburn. Love her to death. She's done a few posts. Some are kind of exposés about her life, which are really cool. If you want to write one of those for yourself, you can even write it under a fake name, whatever you want. But in the battlefield, you'll see that when you click on one of these posts, there's the War of Ideas. You can go down and you can read what people have to say in the battlefield, and then you can engage with them in good faith. There's also a code of conduct page, just to give you the basic rules. This is a 100% free speech haven. This is what it's a free speech haven, but it's also the conduct in which you carry yourself on this website is watched and checked, and the idea is to help people find a way towards good faith discourse. Overcoming feeling the need to attack somebody because you disagree with them, overcoming those urges and being able to engage on this platform. And also, I want to publish your articles. So please, please, please get in contact with me. If you have an article you've always wanted to write, I declare ideological war on Black Lives Matter. I declare ideological war on Ben Shapiro, Pangburn Philosophy, and Sam Harris. There's some really spicy articles on here. Michaela's written one. We got one by Jack Fleck here. There's one really cool on change in beer residue. I forget who wrote that one, but it's Aaron Wooten. So there's some really cool the problems with the IDW, the intellectual dark web, by me introducing my term, the intellectual warm blanket. You'll find some really interesting things on there, but I want to publish your guys' work. So please, please, please send me your work and get in contact. That's it. That's like a 14-hour introduction. How's it going, Alex?
Going pretty well. Having a pretty good day.
Nice. How's it going, Bruce?
Hey, what's up? How's it going, eh?
Hey, how's it going down there, eh?
Right. Just working and thought I would pop in. That's all you guys do.
Deadly. So, what do you want to talk about today, Alex?
Well, I had posted about a week ago, I think it was last Monday, I had posted a question in the Discord as well as on the Pangburn Facebook page about the nature of psychological harm, and can or should we hold people accountable for harm that they may attribute or that other people think they attribute to them. And then I followed that up with something else about just the nature of how we perceive trauma. And I feel like this is a big issue. A lot of reasons. I mean, in my work as a therapist, it certainly comes up, but also just in conversations I have with people or things you see in the media. There's a lot of things lately on, oh, that offends me, or that wounds me, or that's really damaging to my soul, or whatever. People say a lot of things these days. And that's fine if you feel that way. But when we start trying to hold people accountable for other people's feelings, I think it can be problematic, which is why I wanted to pose the discussion.
Interesting. And what were the responses so far?
Well, and I have the Discord up. There was a big discussion, and I'm going to try to condense down a lot of what people said, but there was a big discussion about intent. And some people seem to be, I don't know if it was hung up or just simply curious about, if someone intends to perpetrate psychological harm on another human being, we probably hold them accountable in that case. And for me, my perspective would be that yes, maybe sometimes, but I'm more concerned about the perception of harm than the intent, because someone might intend to harm you psychologically, but you don't take it as negative. It's probably not harm. Or if you're in a situation where someone does something most people would consider benign, but you consider it malevolent, then that's harm to you, but there's no intention there. And so I think how we perceive it and how it manifests in like tangible, measurable consequences is much more important than what someone might have meant by something.
So there's an interesting thing I always think about when we're talking about something like this is, like, if you feel like someone has abused you, that does not necessarily mean they have abused you. You know, it's like if you found someone's behavior to be abusive to you, that does not mean that person's behavior was abusive.
Exactly.
Because, and this is why we have like the legal standard for these things, like harassment and assault. And it's like if someone says, they assaulted me with words. It's like, what does that mean? Well, we're actually in the realm of harassment at that point. Like, I'm not sure you can actually assault someone with words.
Right. And I would say much the same. Like, I think we need to, obviously, it's a lot easier, I think, when there's a legal standard for something. If something is illegal, and especially if there's also some level of physical harm along with it, we have standards for what's allowed, and certain things, rape, physical, attempted murder, chronic abuse, we measure these things a certain way, and we can say, yeah, there's probably going to be psychological harm there, and
Right.
there's ways that we can measure that. But something that doesn't have a legal standard or that isn't societally accepted is a harmful thing. Like something just like someone said some words.
Right.
You really can't hold people accountable for that.
So let's do an example. Like let's say you say to your partner frequently, you're worthless. That might not be called abuse. They might just call it name calling or something. So I mean, there's just this crazy subjective realm when it comes to human interaction and how people's emotionality and emotional knee-jerk reactions differ on certain things, and also evolve into different things as people kind of grow up together.
Right. And what I would say to that, and I'm curious if anyone's going to want to challenge me on this, and if anyone here does, please go ahead. Is like how we measure accountability. Like if you're in that situation and someone keeps insulting you in that way, you can hold them accountable and say that that's psychologically harmful to me, and maybe you insult them back, maybe you leave that relationship, maybe you talk to their friends and be like, hey, that person's a jerk, kind of thing. And that's fine. I mean, we do that every day as human beings, and maybe that's helpful to you psychologically recovering, maybe it isn't, but that's a very different thing than, you can't really hold them legally accountable, and it's not really appropriate for you to, kill them over it. But sure, there's some ways you just interpersonally can create accountability, and that there's nothing wrong with that. Doesn't mean that you'll feel better when it's over, and that's another issue.
Challenge you on what exactly?
Just on the point that if there's any disagreement about holding people accountable, I mean, I'm generally of the position, if it doesn't meet some objective or legal standard, you really can't hold people accountable for psychological harm other than just your own response to it. Maybe you just don't like the person or whatever, but you can't instill consequences for something you perceive as harmful.
Right. Yeah, I think so.
Where we go off the rails too is when someone is claiming that a third, not present party could be harmed by that type of speech.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing to speak up for yourself and you say, hey, I appreciate that, knock it off. It's another thing to say, well, you shouldn't say these things because X group, etc.
Right. And I'm not particularly concerned with things that might harm a person. saying that might be hurtful to someone who's either not here or someone you meet in the future. I mean, maybe you decide as an individual, I don't want to say or do this thing because I'm sensitive to other people and whatnot. That's fine. You can make that choice. But yeah, there shouldn't be stipulations on you can't just because someone might someday have an issue with it. You can't plan your life around other people's potential psychological harm. And I guess the other thing I would bring up with this too, and maybe people have examples from their own life or from friends or family or something like that, but like everyone takes harm differently. I mean, not just the word harm, obviously, that's subjective too, but someone might hate being called an idiot and someone else might just not care.
Right. That's kind of what I was getting at. It's like that area, that kind of middle ground zone of like, and that's just part of relationship, I think, and not just relationships with a partner, but with your brothers, with your sisters, with your aunts, uncles, mom, dad. It's like if someone's doing something that you don't like, it can be hard to come out and say, I don't like that, because you don't know how it's going to affect your relationship. But I ultimately think it's kind of a inevitable necessity if you want that stuff to not continue.
Mm-hmm. And also just to bring in the kind of therapy perspective on it a little bit. I mean, it's not uncommon for people to say, well, I am this way because of this thing. I'm depressed or I'm psychotic or whatever it may be because mom didn't hug me enough or
Right.
dad said those mean things when I was younger or whatever it may be. And that's perfectly fine. And there's some discrepancy on if placing blame actually does anything for you. But at a certain point, it's what did you do? What did you do to combat that harm? When did you realize it? How are you going to change your life now? But just saying so and so hurt me, okay, that doesn't solve your depression. That doesn't do anything for them or for you. So just claiming accountability somewhere doesn't solve it. You're not in therapy to tell me who hurt you. I don't care who hurt you. I care what are you going to do now. That's the only thing I can help with. I can't go hunt down your mom.
Right. The authorities care if there's, a demonstration of actual hurt. But again, it's one of those things where you might have a client come in, Alexander, that's like, and I don't know what you think about this, but like they come in and they're like, my dad won't. It's like my dad uses this one word and I find it so offensive that I can't be around it anymore. Do you ever get people who come into therapy that kind of talk about certain issues they're having that seem to you like it's not really a big deal?
Yeah, I have, and it depends on the situation. Like there's certainly times where someone will say something and I personally don't see it as a big deal.
Right.
And I kind of do have to censor myself in that.
Sure.
It's part of the therapy process. It's a big deal to them.
Right.
And that's perfectly fine with me. Where we run into a problem is, when someone comes and they say to me, my dad says this hurtful thing. I just, and I'm like, okay. And not that I would phrase it this way. I would never phrase it this way to a client, but in my head, it's a little bit, what do you want me to do about that?
Right.
And a lot of people do come in like they're asking for answers. And I'm like, I'm more than happy to guide and help and facilitate conversation, but I'm not coming up with your answers. You have to come up with your answers.
Right.
I'm not going to solve your life for you, especially when it's something like, like to your example, a comment that might not faze me, that's when I really need the client's work and help to understand how they want to deal with it. Because in my head, the way to deal with it is just move on. But that's
Right.
my solution. That's not
Right.
their solution.
Right.
They probably need something a little more assertive.
Gotcha.
Can I ask you a question? Hello, everybody. Can
up,
I ask
Graham?
you a question?
Hello. Sure.
So I got into this interesting talk with a gentleman about last week, and he came from the standpoint of censoring words, and he's like, do you think you're an absolutist of the First Amendment? And I said, I think so, because words just hurt. Now there's harassment where you're calling somebody a name and you just won't leave them alone, but there's also somebody speaking their mind, and I think context is just by far the best thing. And at the end of the day, if it inflicts harm, and in my opinion, it's the person harming themselves, right? If I said something that affects somebody and they have an issue with it, they're actually affecting themselves. Am I wrong here to think that way? Am I thinking?
I would say.
Maybe, oh.
I'd say. I won't say they're affecting themselves. I will say, from your context of what you said, I suppose you're talking about the truth. So when you tend to tell people the truth, their ego sort of takes the jab, right? Like the ego doesn't like that. So I suppose I don't know if I would call it harming themselves. I don't have a proper answer.
I mean, look at what has happened with impeachment. This is the equivalent of somebody talking about a fire in a movie theater, and then somebody yelling fire, and then everybody tramples out of the movie theater crazy because you decide to yell fire. You know, the actions obviously provocated this situation where everybody left, and it caused chaos, and you could be held accountable for that. I've got no problem with that. But if you're just in a movie theater and you're like, man, yeah, it's crazy. I was in a movie theater one time, there's this fire, and then someone says, oh, you said fire, and they all freak out, right? Context. And so that's the thing, is like, if we're going to censor any type of free speech, like, what's the point? What's the point? Should we be talking more about context, right? Like, actions after something's said should be held accountable, and we should watch ourselves, but not censoring. And that's my quarrel, really.
Most definitely not censoring.
And what I would say to that is, and there's some great conversation going on in the YouTube chat that's kind of similar to this. There's a difference between acknowledging who said the thing that hurt you, and it's certainly possible, whoever it is, they said the thing, okay, but you have to take ownership of your response to it, and your emotions. And people have more or less control over what they react to, but sometimes you don't. Sometimes you have this really emotional response to something, and you didn't know that word was going to hit you that way. That's totally fine. But you do have to own that is your emotion coming from you. So not to say that people are at fault for not managing things, or they have to deal with it all themselves, or people can't say hurtful stuff. But the way I phrased it in the Discord a few days ago was, we have to own our own psyche. You have to accept, I'm hurting because I'm me. You can't say that someone else is instilling emotion into you. That doesn't work.
Yeah, I actually do understand what you mean, because it's almost akin to the movement of your awareness, right? So it's almost like, giving people the ability to harm you in some sense. Of course, you would never be absolute with the control of your awareness, but to some degree you can mitigate its movement to the point where you would feel harm. So I do understand and agree with that, actually.
Yeah, this happens a lot in the LGBTQ community.
Oh, tell me about it. I live it.
It's interesting, because people say, yeah. What's up, Bruce?
Well, that topic alone is like just maddening to me, because, well, unfortunately, what happens in that is the term community gets thrown around far too loosely. And it's created to build up what would be considered a group of people that are somehow afflicted, yet are all like community implies you have the same values, you exist in some centralized way, and you need to be represented as a whole. But I mean, this is only used in situations when people want to either demonize a community of people, which is like using the word community is wrong there, but demonizing a set of people they don't like, or building up a set of people to bolster their otherwise loose argument. Because this term community, to say, well, the community is affected, right? Like the community's feelings are hurt. Well, okay, where is this community? This is madness. It's like a giant straw man.
Well, it's interesting
crazy.
because it's also an attack on words, not attack on the community. Like the community is like, well, you know, you can say some hateful shit, but then they go after the word. They don't go after. It's not like about the community. It's like it's the words you use. You know, like dyke or like fag. Sorry if I'm saying anything offensive, but that kind of stuff. It's like people. It just immediately triggers, right? And it has nothing to do with the community. Just a word.
Those words are gay. Use them.
If it was about the community, they would talk about new ways to use it, or ways to change it, or ways to. I mean, like you can literally change a word. Like it's the way I say it. Like, you know, if everybody's saying the N-word, right, and they just mean it like my brother, we should all be saying it, and then in 20, 30 years, it won't be offensive. Like it won't be. Like
I mean, the term rape,
in that community,
right? The term like rape or ear Nazi, or Nazi, or one of those words. Like people use the term rape or Nazi, like like it's no big deal.
Like it's going out of style.
So like it's like, oh, what's that, bro?
Sorry about that.
If the use of a word to criticize or insult whatever breaks down your entire community, whatever that is, then you apparently don't have a very strong community. I mean, I think all of us have been in Pangburn Discord before. I mean, we know some of the comments that have been hurled at Pangburn. I mean, YouTube demonetized him and we're all still here because that, in the grand scheme of things, we're stronger than that. I mean, that's what a community should be.
Yeah, but what is community like? This is what's even more insane. It goes to your point of like feelings, right? What does not only are people trying to somehow define feelings and intentions, they're also using the same feelings and intention terminology to apply to an entire lot of people that aren't actually asking to be applied on them. So you have like I don't even know, like multiple layers and like a meta issue here in addition to the one that you've raised.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, with the community thing, it's the elimination of individuality, and you replace it with groupthink. So the person no longer thinks as an individual, hence the possibility of the elimination of free thought. So we all think as a community, and what sort of thoughts do we think? Well, the thoughts we think are the qualifier that qualifies us to be in that community. So, for example, Black people, we should all think systemic racism because we're a community of Black people, sort of stuff, right? So the word community is just it's just a replacement for we should think like a group. It's not necessarily that we are together, right? As in the sense of Alexander's example of how we're still here after Pangburn's demonetization.
I think it's a mixer of both. And what I mean by that is, so I'm sitting on the couch of the day over the weekend, and the wifey's like, and she said somebody mentioned something about furries, right? and she's just like, and I was like, oh, here, let me tell you a story about furries. And she's like, all right. And I'm like, oh, I got this guy I talked to on Discord. He's a furry. And I talk to people on Discord because there's people of all walks in life. And I was like, and I was asking him a few questions. And like, he's just like, yeah, the taboo is you never take off your helmet, but there's this room where it's like hella air conditioner at like at events, and you can take off your helmet. And I was talking to this one guy on the floor. It turns out this guy's like 90 fucking years old. And I was like, what? That's crazy. And he's like, yeah, he's been doing it since he was a kid. And he never, and then when furries kind of, became the rage and like he really got into it and it was really cool. And I was like, oh, it's really awesome. And my wife and my daughter are going back and forth, like kind of making fun of him. And they think it's funny and it's in their private intentions and their private thoughts. They're in a secure environment and we can poke fun at people. It's great. But to me, it just seems like, well, what's so funny about furries? And she was like, well, they're this or they're that. And you hear people like this talk all the time in group, right? And you're like, well, a group is going to be like this and like that. And I just look at that and I look so weird and preponderous. She's like, what? And I'm like, that's just fucking people. Those are the same people in the boardrooms. Those are the same people in the fucking bus station, sweeping your fucking garbage off the streets. Like, people are people, and then they join groups, but they're people first. And so those groups are eclectic, full of multiple ranges. And so really, it's hard for me to put a stigma on anybody because of a group, right? The group has an agenda, but the person itself could be all sorts of flavors and sizes and colors. And that's the interesting thing about me is you speak about that independent and then you think about the group. Well, I think it's both. I think there's a group mission, but then those people come in all sorts of shapes and varieties. And that's what's interesting to me. Now, you might not find a racist in a, Black Lives Matter. I don't know. Maybe you find a racist, but there's the rarities where you don't find, a KKK member sitting in a Black Lives Matter rally. But you never know.
You probably
never
won't.
know.
But no. You see, I do understand what you're saying, but what I was getting at was the word community is really just when people say LGBT community, this community, whatever. In this present time, what they actually mean is, we think we share these ideologies, period, right? Of course there are I do believe individuals are the ultimate minority. Of course there are individuals of all different colors and taste and all that stuff, but the premise of that word community is we share this idea, we share this goal, we share this activism proponent and all that. That's what I was sort of getting.
Yeah. In business, we have a mission statement. There's actually two. There's a mission statement, and then there's I forgot what the other statement's called. Pangburn might know, but there's usually two statements you come up with a company so that everybody is aware of what we're trying to do.
Code of ethics, I think.
Motto, mission statement.
Yeah. There's a motto. Thank you. There's a motto and a mission statement. Motto is very simple and to the point. There's a mission statement, which is about two or three sentences, which kind of outlays the motto sometimes. But it's that's the type of thing that I think. And we look at something like Lives Matter, or you look at something, like a fascist party or something like that. It's very clear, right? In their mission statement, if it has threats of violence or threats of anything like that, then you can gather from them the mentality. LGBTQ community is just, I don't know, like there's kind of these mission statements, but it almost seems like they attack words, and there's multiple groups that do this. And my fear is that given the Democratic majority right now, could we have words censored? For what reason? And how far are they going to go? That shit scares me, right?
I think with a lot of these communities, we are getting to a point where the collective kind of takes on a mind of its own that's not necessarily made up of individuals. It's essentially a group mind of like, this is the people might say like, this is the majority opinion, or this is what people in this group are supposed to think. But it doesn't really, that set of values, whatever it is for whatever group it is, doesn't really specifically address any single individual in the group. It's just this collective mass of concepts. And when they say, this thing is harming the group for you to say this or to do this thing, really, they're saying it's harming this idea, this group concept that exists. it might harm some of the individuals and it might not harm the other half. We're almost letting these sets of values and stereotypes take on a life of their own, which is senseless.
It's actually interesting you brought that up. Jordan Peterson interviewed this guy, Dr. Gad Saad, I think is his name, and he wrote
The
book called,
Godfather.
yeah, he wrote a book called something Parasites.
The parasitic, so the parasitic mind. And just by the way, when I met Gad Saad in Montreal, he came to one of my events. He is a really cool dude, hilarious guy.
Yeah,
just wanted to throw that in.
So yeah, it's interesting.
Pangburn, you're gonna pick that name up off the floor.
Say that again.
You're gonna pick that name up off the floor.
Pick what? Sorry. Sorry, I didn't hear.
Don't worry about it. Disregard.
Dropping names.
Oh, dropping names. Yeah. Oh,
I want to
okay.
pick that up off the floor.
I just wanted to mention, like, he's depicted as this complete asshole by so many people on social media, and I'm like, dude, this guy is, and he's also parroted. People talk about him like he's this white supremacist or something. He is an incredibly liberal dude.
Yeah, he seems cool as shit to me. I've never.
Well, he's very.
Dude, you guys are not. You're assuming that folks are being rational in these epithets they throw at people. If they're not, you know what I mean?
No.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Moron.
I'm just saying that. I would like to offer my experience with the guy that I would say every loud asshole that I've read on Twitter seems to think that him, Jordan Peterson, even Sam Harris and others are just out there in this have this warrior mission to keep whites alive or something. It's just stupid.
I mean, anyone in that ilk has been royally misrepresented.
Yeah.
And actually it goes back to the same sort of discussion that Alex was talking about, and when it comes to intentions. Like, somebody's feelings are hurt. Someone like God Saad or Jordan Peterson brings up something that truly exists as far as data is concerned. Yeah. And they're like, oh, no, we can't have that. This makes me feel bad.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, dude, listen, there are people that were claiming all sorts of ridiculous things about Trump being in office, okay? The fact that he's in office making you feel a certain way when your life hasn't changed and you're still eating avocados and using an iPhone, like, come on, folks, you're far too I guess fast and loose with what makes people feel bad and ascribing intentions.
Words,
it's madness.
Yeah. Words. Some of these words that used to mean something, like saying someone was being racist, or saying someone was being sexist, or saying someone was being retarded. Like, these things used to mean something, but now, or even like legal terms, like people just throw them around like they're nothing. People defame people like it's nothing. Like it just doesn't matter. It's like, oh, everyone else is doing it. It's like, really? Is that the way your brain works? Like, when you finally get called out for some of your nonsense, everyone else did it. What are you, 5? Like, do you not have higher
5.
moral principles than that? Fuck.
Yes, it's most psychologists, and I think Alexander might be able to. I don't know if he's a psychologist, can back this up, but I heard the national census was a majority of adult Americans do not have an emotional maturity past the age of 11.
Savage.
Like, what the fuck? And then you start, like, I literally went. I live up in the hills. I enjoy my community, but I don't get out and like socialize a lot, especially with COVID going out, and hence the reason why I'm on Discord. Like, I have a lot of clients and I talk to them, and they're all pretty cool people. It's really nice. But then, like, I just went out for a doctor's appointment. Went down to like the really large city I live near, and everybody looked like they were fucking miserable. I don't know how to describe it. I felt like the joyous man in the world. It was a bright, fucking sunny day. It's 70 degrees here in fucking California. And it's just like, you guys fucking hate life. Like, Jesus, man. and it was like people being moved around like cattle. It was just the weirdest thing, man. And I'm just like, what the fuck is wrong with people? You know, that was crazy.
Well, to touch on your point, I'm not a psychologist by trade. I'm a counselor, and I don't know that specific stat you're referencing. But I mean, I can at least say that most people are not at the psychological maturity of their chronological age. Yeah,
And that's interesting, Alex, because unless we're so what I would say is, what is the baseline then of what is considered psychologically mature if most people are not at the psychological maturity of the age? So how is the claim being made that they're not mature at that age unless something has changed since the research of what the age of maturity is?
I believe the answer is voting independent.
huh? I missed that last part.
Voting independent. I don't get that.
Like voting for the independent party.
No, what I'm saying is
vote independent, man. I'm on the fringe.
In other words, what has changed?
Yeah, it's a hard one, man.
What has changed?
If most people are not on the age that they should be as far as intellectual maturity is concerned, then how can we say that?
How can we say that they're not at age of maturity if most people aren't there?
What defines the curve?
Yeah.
Yeah, so and different people in the mental health profession will have different perspectives on this, but there's a couple trends that are agreed upon. So a lot of research over many years, and we're still doing more, has outlined basically certain mile markers or characteristics or outlook things that you would expect to see at a certain age just based on the nature of human life. So like a big one, for example, is launching. So adolescents or young adults, and the language kind of shifts, are supposed to launch by a certain point, relieve themselves of their parents, be able to achieve some level of independence. And you expect with that, there's a level of psychological launching. So not only are you living apart, but you're able to think for yourself and manage your daily needs. You don't need to call mom and ask a question every 2 minutes kind of thing. And really 18 to 24 max, we should see that launching have occurred. And yet you see people that don't know how to handle just daily stresses. And whether or not they're calling their mom or whatever, like the ability to function as an independent person apart from someone else is a skill you should have by the point of launch. So if you have a 30-year-old who just cannot function on their own, they have to be in a relationship or they have to have close connections to all their family members at all times, they are not psychologically mature. That just being one example of how that kind of frames.
Right. Okay. It's fascinating.
Same thing happens with
a lot to do with culture.
When you really think about it as well, it's like that's actually quite accurate, because I think one of the things with mammals is, I think we're the most what was we going to call them now? Infants we have the longest years of dependency, I think. Mammals, I think humans even 18 years. So it actually then follows that at some point after 18 years, quite close, you should, be sort of independent. That makes quite a bit of sense, actually.
Absolutely. And there's certainly elements of culture and history to this. I mean, the traditional launching age used to be younger than it is now. But that goes with so many other things. I mean, the average human lifespan was shorter, so you kind of needed to pick up on things a little bit quicker. And, life was simpler and not simple in different ways. And so we adjust these things with time. And probably since I'm maybe estimating a bit here, but since at least the 20th century, 18 to 24 has been seen as that launching age. But if you go back, 200 years, it was probably more like 15, 16. And that's fine. And it can be mature at different points in time based on human lifespan development. And that's perfectly okay too. One day we might launch at 28 if humans are living long enough. I doubt it, but maybe.
I think I missed part of that because I had to go get another beer. But I think what's important is that we bolster more family, more community. I mean, it's clearly shown that there's this huge development between this young age, but then there's also this like finishing of development of the mind until later years. But we release our kids at 18. But it's like we should have a maybe a more family unit environment or types of environments where they're not pressured to be out on their own at 2021. You know, like the development still happens until 25 and in some cases later to 30. And so I think you're right that we have this kind of better system in place to kind of help them out. I mean, I was a fuck up until I hit 30. I don't tell you, but shit.
Well, and it can be defined in different ways. And I think what's important is what skills we really hone in on. And I'm trying to think of a good example. Okay, so there's a skill called generativity. I think I'm saying that properly. Which is basically that you can see among yourself, beyond yourself, really look into your community. You know, my peers at work, my close friends, you know, your family, your progeny, and you know, what am I going to do for their benefit? That's a skill that is expected to be mastered in middle age. No 25-year-old, 30-year-old is going to have that skill down. We don't expect that. But there is a level of like, I can have a relationship with another human being and treat them in a healthy way. That is developmentally appropriate by 30. So there's different stages and there's always more learning to do. And I'm not saying that you be totally independent from friends or parents or whatever by some X age, but there's a certain level of independence and maturity that you should have. I mean, in some cases, I mean, you can see a person who's not where they should be and you look and you go, that's just not right. And if you get that feeling, you're probably on the right track.
Yeah. I suppose you could also say it's the parenting style also influences the period of launch, right? So because if you have if you were in a sort of parenting style where you were cuddled for every single thing, regardless of if they were right or wrong, you'd be less likely to launch between your years, so 18 to 24. But this is theory, you can correct me. And if you've got like a tough love sort of parenting style, you'd be much more likely, I think, to launch about the same period, if not earlier. But you can.
So there
Sure.
actually is some truth in that because of what the Chinese were doing since the 80s of the one child, one family rule. In some cases, they allowed up to 2 children, which hence the 1.5 rule. And it led to an issue with their military because they found that when the kids were ready to devote their 2 some odd years or whatever that they mandatorily have to do for the army, that they found just a bunch of pussies basically. And the problem was is that they had 2 parents, right? Strong family unit, but the kids were spoiled. And so they're saying that they're actually probably going to be shifting the dynamic to maybe a 2 or 3 kid policy because it's causing huge issues with their society and spoiled children. My wife and I were looking into it because we got 3 children. And I was like, yeah, I think we're at a pretty healthy rate. And she was like, well, do you have any science to back that up? And I was like, fuck. So I went and actually did some research. Turned out that 4 children is actually the optimization of having a strong family unit that evens out all your kids. And actually reducing children beyond that has a negative effect on your kids because of the fact that they don't really mature correctly. And you get kids that become kids when they're older because we all are a kind of an echo of our kind of our habits that we formed as children. It's interesting to think about, but yeah, so there is some truth to what you're saying when you're talking about spoiled brats.
Well, and probably something you read as well, Grim, but the age of those children and of course how you parent them would be a big factor in that as well.
Yeah, and the other side of it too is the age of the adults. We find ourselves in, especially in first world nations that have to work hard, is they don't have kids until their late 30s or sometimes late 40s. And that has a huge effect on the kids because there's just this huge gap of time and being a fun parent and enjoying it more towards your kind of rugged, strict ways when you're at that age. I mean, you've got a 15-year-old hanging out with their 60-year-old dad. Let's face it, they're probably not going to be into too many things, as much. So I don't know. And it depends on everybody, of course. It's not for everybody, but there is, what I've noticed is there is some interesting things. Having a 15-year-old myself, being 37, and then talking to my sister, talking to my daughter's friends. She talks about her friends all the time, and she's like, "Oh no, their dads are old as shit, and they don't even like get along." They do really. She's like, "You're the fun dad, you're always doing stuff and having a blast." I was like, "Oh, thanks," but I had her when I was like fucking 20, so it's hard, really is hard.
And if I can, another thing to just keep in mind is the age that the parent is likely to die. And as morbid as morbid and sad as that might sound,
Sure.
if you have older parents, if your parents happen to be by miracles or whatever 40 or something when they have the kid, I mean the kid could be, theoretically any age, but in their 20s 30s or something when their parents die, and most people are not psychologically ready for that to occur by that age. And of course there are tons of people where they're very unfortunate and that does happen sooner, but do you want to put your child in a position where they're 25 and you're deceased?
Hard one for sure. I don't know.
That reminds me of something really funny when you're talking about the number of children that might be optimal. Something really funny that Gavin McInnes always says. And he says, 1 child is for fags, 2 is for losers, 3 is the bare minimum. But I mean, he's being ridiculous, but at the same time, like, if there's research to back him up on that, that would be quite vindicating for him, which is really funny.
You just mentioned Gavin McInnes' name. Now that means I'm definitely in the shit box for the rest of my life with YouTube.
Yeah.
Isn't that really a shame? Isn't that just
That's a good point. You are done, Pangburn.
I'm
Who's
fucking
Gavin
done.
McInnes?
I'm gonna go grab my shotgun.
Whoa, dude, you don't know who that is?
No, I don't know who Gavin McInnes is.
Well, look him up. He was the creator of Vice, and he ended up becoming the founder of the Proud Boys, or at least one of the founders of the Proud Boys.
The Canadian, isn't he?
Yeah, he's Canadian, family Scottish. He lives in America. He's basically
he's got some funny
dude. He
stuff.
Used to be on Red Eye. He's really
he's been
He's
invited
got a new
on
show on YouTube.
Yeah, I think he does. Actually,
No, it's not on YouTube. No, he's never. He's like kind of banned from.
It's called
YouTube.
The Deadly Isms, if I remember right.
Yeah, I think he's just rebranded and started.
I'd be very surprised if they allow him on there. I don't know.
It's really good. I watched a few episodes. It was really good. Really good.
Are you sure someone else isn't uploading that?
Here, I'll post it. It's
Maybe.
him himself. He was advertising it.
Oh, I haven't watched him in a couple of weeks now. So, I thought that was John Stossel.
No, John Stossel I like, but he has a show called The Deadly Isms, and he talks about all the isms. Yeah.
I've never seen that. I don't know how I missed it, but
Post it.
I haven't watched him in a while. It's been a couple of months. But he's one of those guys that totally was canceled because he made people's feelings hurt. And then they also claim all sorts of things, like you were talking about, actions versus inciting in words. Like they made him out to be like a terrorist.
Oh yeah, big time.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
He's causing me terror. Can you imagine? Like, I just
so
don't get
hard.
like people who are just so obsessed with feeling. You know, there's this righteousness when it comes to emotion, and I talk about this in my first book. There's this self-righteousness that it's like people have this like naturalistic fallacious feeling about the first emotion that is the strongest that pops into their head. They're automatically like, yeah, this is good because it was the strongest and first, and then they just end up fucking acting on that, and then you're just like, this person's not thinking at all. They're just, if you want to talk about no free will, there's a difference between the person that's like noticing the deterministic quality of their mind, and then the person who isn't, the person who thinks that it's like right to begin with. There's a difference there.
Yeah, and that's what I think the emotional intelligence comes through, is because I mean, I had, and Travis, you probably relate to this, but when you go through things like depression, and it's one of those things that you start to kind of like relearn emotion. You like have to like figure out what your emotion means. And guys are very good at compartmentalizing, which is good. But the thing is that something about me, I had to like relearn it. That's not him?
No.
That dude looks exactly like him.
Yeah, dude, I knew it wasn't him.
It's a double. He's still doing it, but it's a double.
Way they'd let him back on YouTube. There's no way they'd let him back on YouTube, dude.
Interesting. But anyway,
his jokes were that bad, eh?
Well,
he's Canadian.
He's Canadian. Yeah.
Nice. I'll take it.
Gavin Miles McInnes, is that who you're talking about? McInnes.
Oh, Miles, yeah, McInnes, yeah.
McInnes. Yeah, that dude hell looks like him. I mean, come on.
This guy has more gray hair than he does.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway. Yeah, anyway, so yeah, I had to learn emotion. Then I realized that my emotion was too adolescent when I had to relearn it, And it was hard for me. I think depression kind of teaches you that, like, hey, I'm going to get rid of my emotion. Now I'm depressed, and then I got to relearn all this emotion again. Fucking hard. But you end up maturing it. People actually focus on that realm more. But nowadays, it feels like everybody just goes with the feeling. I feel like I got robbed, so fuck you, And it's just like, what the fuck, dude? Like, no, yeah. That's not.
Well,
it's like people feel the world is bad, yet they live in the greatest fucking time that ever existed.
It's, I just call it a hardcore amount of pussification.
That right there is enough to get you canceled.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Hardcore amounts of personification.
No, pussification. Being a pussy.
Trying to save you.
Well, that's assuming these people are actually
Pangburn.
And the claims of harm are not just strategic.
Sure. Yeah. And there are some people that are just making a ton of fucking money on that virtue signaling stuff. And I would even say some intellectuals who are friends of mine dabble in that a little bit sometimes. Where they see if I retweet this, and I'm telling you, I've seen it. I have real world examples. I'm not sure if I'll say what they are, but certain people tend to have this long stream during spurts of times when their viewership seems to be down. They have this long stream of like retweeting black people or something on their stream. And this will be from someone who has been accused of not platforming black people enough or something. So it's having this effect. Yikes. And then they say, wow, I can really tap into this feeling that I'm like some kind of white supremacist. If only I retweet this poor black person a few times. It's just like, man.
No, that really gets. I remember after the George Floyd thingy, and I was on YouTube, and every fucking time the ads come up, and you just see black people, the ads, and it's like, God.
Well, this is when the Hodge twins started really talking about this crap. when every second ad out there says black people think this, black people are this, black people want this, black people this, black people this. And then the Hodge twins are like, stop fucking talking for a whole race of people that many of them fucking disagree with you, shithead. And they're running these ads on YouTube as though these select few demagogues are the voices of the black people. That's just never existed. Like you,
Dude, that's the whole thing I was talking about with the whole community term, which is just identity politics run awry.
Well, and you hear a lot of times about, certain groups not having a voice or historically not having a voice. I think telling them what their voice is just as bad.
Well, yeah. And people think that just because, like, am I going to come out and say I'm the king of the white people? White people want this. No, I'm not going to do that because that's only something a retard would do.
King of the white people.
I don't, like...
Try and be less white, dude.
Can I nominate Bruce for that
one? Bruce, king of the white people.
I just imagined you in a cape and underpants.
It would just be one gif. All you need is to make Bruce king of the black people. One gif of Bruce going yikes into his mic. That's all you need.
That's all you need. Yeah. It is crazy. It only works on the minority. Like, you can't, which is ridiculous, right? It's, you want to be felt validated, as a minority, or that's what they're trying to do. And yet they take the minority and turn them into, a pet. Which is just crazy.
Holy fuck. Like, if you want to talk about actual racism, it's the people who are standing up and saying, I speak for my entire race. And then when I'm like, actually, no, the Hodge twins and millions of their black fans disagree with you. Those are all just Uncle Toms. Who's the fucking racist? Tell me.
A lot of Africans disagree with you as well.
Yeah, a lot of fucking... like, holy fuck. It's like, stop. This is what Martin Luther King Jr. was talking about with these retards took a hold of it and were like, we're going to make it all about this, like, hunting down the ghost racists out there. And they just... they couldn't find them, so then they create these other things and look at statistics incorrectly. And then it's just, you're just left with people not appreciating certain people with color in your group and appreciating only other people with certain color in your group. And if someone else comes along that isn't the color of your group and says something, it's not valid automatically. So this is just pure and utter racism, and it's the thing I talked about in my Black Lives Matter, is a racist organization.
Yeah, well, they've changed the term at that layer of what
most of the funny thing is most of the proponents of not the founders, so most of the guys who just post the black squares, they don't actually know what the fuck they're doing. Like, I've spoken to most of them, which were my friends or are, and they don't know anything. They just think they're being it's a noble cause, and they're sort of what is it? They're sort of
awareness.
So, and it's there. I'm not trying to make an excuse for them. It's their sort of
no. I know what you're saying. It's when you buy into an idea that you're being hunted by racists, like literally a lot of black people in the United States who have been radicalized by this idea think that there are cops out there hunting them to kill them. Can you imagine thinking this in a free country that actually has full equality written into the law? It didn't used to, and obviously there was. The United States did go through bouts of systemic racism. So it's like, but to claim that this still exists and that to tell it's abusive to tell your child because of the color of your skin there are going to be those out there hunting you. Mm-hmm. That's not a way to raise a child and to help them overcome whatever other obstacles they have, whether it be financial, educational, cultural, like so many cultural things that are going to get in the way of people being well.
It's funny, my sister bought into that because she studied political science, which is where you get the fucking So she bought into the Holy Trinity militant feminism, every fucking thing you think about. So I remember sort of talking to her about it, and she was just not having it. And over time, she's just slowly sort of getting out of it.
To realize
her life is way better than it used to be.
Right.
So,
of course.
Yeah, I just
life
got
of
an email that said, I'm required now, like it is now, it's no longer optional. I am now required to take a diversity and inclusion training.
Oh,
yep.
It's a requirement at the place I work.
I've had to do
I have
it.
to enroll.
Bollocks, mate. That is absolute rubbish.
And it's like two trainings of intentional inclusion and tackling inclusion, and you have to take both of them.
Wow.
You only had two?
So
Bruce. Two. Well, this is required, right? It didn't used to be.
What are these questions that you're going to be asked, do you think? Or
I
Alex,
I haven't looked at them.
Yeah,
but
Alex, what are some of the things
I'm sure they're... Yeah, what have they asked you, Alex?
Well, they didn't so much ask me things, and I think we might be talking about slightly different programs, but at the last place I worked, there was a whole series of diversity, inclusion, such videos that I had to watch. I'm trying to remember how long they were. There were like 4 or 5 of them. I think it took me about maybe 4.5 hours. And then at the end, at the end of each one, there are like 10 questions, and you have to get like at least 8 of them right or something.
Dude, if you took your hourly rate and then applied it to the amount of time, like that's if I take my hourly rate and apply it to the amount of time it would take me to finish a 5-hour exam, I mean that's crazy money that is wasted.
You're falsely assuming I got paid for that.
What I'm saying is like, I'm salaried, right? So like they would have to pay, they're paying me for the time, like most people are in these positions. I work from home. People rarely ever even turn their camera on when we talk to each other. I don't know who the hell's who. It doesn't matter. It doesn't including in what? Is your code committed? Do I have to now like worry about inclusion and racism and code comments? Like this is crazy town. Absolute crazy town.
You go to LinkedIn, mate. It's the hub of everything.
I know. I try not to browse that thing, but occasionally I'll go on there, and the people I've decided to connect with, it's like going to a feminist rally,
mate,
or something along those lines. I mean, it's crazy.
I remember it was 2 days ago. This I think Southeast Asian girl. She posted, when I apply to a job, I think about, can they pronounce my name right? Who do they think I am? You don't think that because you have privilege, and I'm like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah,
So I replied her with a very long sort of thing, like just telling her, mate, this is rubbish, and you need to fucking.
The presumption. I just have to say something for the record. The presumption of one's the presumption of one's privilege is one of the most insidious, nasty ideas that people just throw around like it means nothing. Assuming one has privilege is a terrible thing to do, because you minimize what struggles that person may have actually had in their life, which may in fact have been a lot more than yours, asshole.
Don't you? I learned recently where all that came from.
I would love to hear your theory. Definitely.
So the general idea seems to be that because these so-called progressives, let's just be real, they're the ones who started talking this bullshit, because they grew up in this incredibly cushy society where they didn't have a whole lot to suffer through, because the human brain is just hardwired to find things to overcome. The way I like that it was put was, progressives and a lot of other people in this call right now had actual suffering and had shit that we actually had to deal with, whether it be less than ideal living circumstances, shit parents, psychological harm. So when we hear shit like white privilege, we just go, you're a fucking idiot, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
Okay.
But because,
go ahead.
But because they don't know real suffering because they just didn't grow up having to deal with real suffering. A lot of them are white. Let's just be real. They had to invent something. They had to invent a means of suffering to get over, because that's just how our brains are programmed. So I would say don't judge them too harshly, because they're not really in control of that, but still they can go fuck themselves. So, yeah.
That is an interesting theory, man, by the way.
Yeah, it is.
So I want to jump in because this is
the demand for racism has exceeded the supply.
Interesting.
But Aaron,
say that again, Pete. What were you saying? Who's Rageaholic?
Yeah, Razor Fist.
Oh, so he's using like a market analogy? That's interesting.
it's a good
Wait, who created the demand for that, though?
I think it's what the last guy was saying about looking for battles where they don't exist. Inventing dragons to slay.
Yeah. So in this case, it just happened to be racism or whatever ism it is. Yeah. Interesting. Well, that's more. So +1 to the market theories.
So if the topic that we're talking about is psychological harm, I feel like I'm qualified to speak on this subject. Even though I'm really don't like talking about myself. The human body is capable of a lot of amazing things. If you get a cut, probably maybe with medicine, or maybe if you're just lucky enough to have the right kinds of genes, your body can do a pretty damn good job of healing itself. And the brain, I don't underestimate or sort of downplay the absolute just amazingness that is the human brain. Not GPS. It's capable of doing so many amazing things. But if there's one thing that the human brain is really bad at, it's repairing mental trauma. Now, I'll just give you a quick example. For those who don't know by now, my childhood sucked. Constant abuse from family and friends. And in as much as I personally tried to simply just get over it, it's in the past. I'm an adult now. Haven't talked to those assholes in years. Just a couple nights ago, I had another dream about getting into a physical altercation with my own mother, where I literally threatened her with a butcher knife. So this is one of the many reasons why I'm so adamant about pushing for parents being held to account. Especially when you traumatize someone at such a young age, if it's even possible to undo that trauma, it takes years, if not the rest of their lives. And some emotional scars don't heal, because for some reason the human body is just not good at that. Now, I believe that it comes from the fact that we as a species are still hunter-gatherers. And we're hunter-gatherers living in a society where we neither have to hunt nor gather anymore. We've added all kinds of complications to our being that our brains are not used to and are clearly not prepared for. So psychological harm is, in my opinion, one of the worst things that you can do to a human being. Physical pain, the body can heal from most physical pain. Emotional pain, good luck. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on the matter.
Cool.
Well,
A little bit of silence for everyone's physical trauma and emotional trauma.
Well, I do want to say I'm glad you brought that up, Aaron, because that actually goes to a question I put in the Discord this week that I wanted to get people's thoughts on. But I'm gonna kind of tweak it a little bit, and each person can answer this, or you don't have to. But do you think you've experienced trauma in your life? What you personally would consider trauma? And secondly, do you think you've experienced what would be considered clinical trauma?
Okay. I've heard of the word trauma a lot, but I don't really know what it means precisely. So if you could sort of elaborate on that, that would be
more than happy to elaborate, but I'm gonna hold off because I actually want to start with what people think it means because I think that's more interesting.
Definitely. That's like the IQ topic. It's fascinating to me what people think it means.
Like, this is me personally. I don't like to give things such as trauma power, because I do feel once you think about it, or once you think about it, or you sort of not think about it, once you recognize it, it has some sort of power over you. So personally, I don't think I have gone through any trauma, but my psychologist would sort of speak otherwise. So, but you could say
you have one of those. Okay. That's a topic I will get to.
Yeah.
I might use the classic example of parents and moving goalposts make someone feel that they're never good enough. That's something that can carry on. You know, those scars follow you later into life.
Mm-hmm. So would you consider that personal trauma?
I mean, if we're talking about emotional trauma, I can certainly see that as like, you know, you carry it with you. It's not temporary.
Do you think that's something that should be clinically diagnosed? Not that it has to be. I'm just asking if you think it's at that level.
I guess it depends on the person.
Okay.
I mean, I think everybody's had some degree of that where, you know, they felt like they weren't good enough. Unless they're just complete, you know, narcissists.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really feel like I've already answered this question, but just
So
for the sake of
your general
consistency, yes.
Your general question, Alex, was about who has experienced trauma. Is that right?
Yes. Well,
I thought we were
who has
defining it.
experienced? Well, so the initial question was
Like
who has experienced what they would personally
Right.
consider to be trauma.
Yeah.
Or you could, if you don't want to talk of personal experience, you can say like how you would define personal trauma. That's fine too. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to distinguish between objective and subjective.
Yeah, I think the more we delve
go
into
ahead.
people's lives. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm hearing the feedback of the YouTube stream from someone. If you could turn
Not
that
me.
down in the back, yeah. But no, I think you know, if you look at almost every person's life, you're gonna find traumatic moments. But it's an interesting way you phrased it, Alex. Is you know, would you describe it as trauma? Because it's weird because the people I talk to who have experienced the most trauma tend to downplay it and have a weird feeling to actually calling it trauma. It's a weird thing I've noticed in conversations with people. There are people who like to talk about their trauma a lot and wear it on their sleeve and make quite a spectacle out of it, which is very interesting, and not to say that it's wrong necessarily. But yeah, definitely I would say for me personally, tons of trauma, tons of it. Yeah, I mean, that I would consider trauma, and then I would, go on further to say that the DSM would support that.
So that's kind of one of the big sticking points for me, and where, I I actually disagree with a lot of my colleagues,
Mm.
is in the use of the word trauma,
Right.
and I think that it is overused by clinicians and by the public.
Oh yeah.
And there is a distinction between using a word and applying a diagnosis, but the reason I bring all this up and the reason I think it relates to psychological harm so much is there are certainly things that are traumatic and that we might agree are objectively, and there are things that people might personally consider was traumatic for them. I still draw a line between whether or not I would ever diagnose you with it, but if you want to call it that, maybe okay. But to just say bad thing happened, someone said thing, someone did thing, I'm traumatized, it's traumatic for me.
Yeah.
You are building up your own psychological harm in a way not necessary.
Sure.
Things can be upsetting. They can even be, if you want to call them traumatizing,
Right.
way, label it this trauma in my life. It's just, I don't think, fruitful. That is not to say certain things, like from the information you gave, Aaron, sounds like a horrible childhood. Sounds totally, I would probably call that traumatic. Someone says like, oh, someone called me a name, I'm so traumatized. Stop. You're offended.
Yeah.
You don't like it. You're not
Snowflake
traumatized.
Yeah, totally. I know what you mean, and people throw it around so much, and I see this on Facebook. I see people throw around like, have you experienced the trauma of someone that is always around to put you down? And I'm kind of like,
that's called an asshole.
Yeah. I think I know what you're saying, Alex. Is that trauma, the way people use it, it's kind of using it, it's not meaning anything anymore, like racism and sexism and these terms that are overused. It's just, when's it going to mean something again? You know?
Yeah, it's like, is this behavior just bad, or is it like, criminal?
Is it actually abusive, or is the other person just experiencing abuse? Those are two different things, you know?
And of course, the other thing we have to keep in mind here is that for whatever effect that this might have, first of all, the word trauma is not the only word in the English language that's overused. No. Let's just be real. Most of them are. But
totally.
The problem with all of these is you get the boy who cried wolf situation.
Yeah.
Where when everybody is using the word, it tends to kind of lose its meaning, because, of course, the word trauma, I would believe, was meant to be something that doesn't happen all the time. Therefore, it's a word that's supposed to have some significance. It's just like, it's like gold. It's supposed to be rare. So it's something that's supposed to go, holy shit, that was bad. But when everybody uses the word, and suddenly everything is traumatic, from the thing that somebody said to you to literally being raped, then all of a sudden they all blur together. And you're going to find that you're going to get to a point where actual trauma is taken with nearly as much sort of the seriousness that it should be, because it's like, are you really being serious, or are we really?
I know. Yeah.
What are you?
Yeah, or is this just a synonym for damage?
You know what I think? I think there's something. I just want to quickly say something that's quite related to this. I think the people who do use trauma where there isn't really trauma being exerted, is they do that because it's kind of linked to the victim mentality, where there's just something delicious about the idea that you're damned by the world, because then implicitly makes you righteous, right? So
yeah, man.
Yeah.
And I'm not counting in people who do actually experience traumatic situations. You know, this is exclusive to those who claim quite, if not insignificant, things as traumatic, and so.
Well, and in my defense, I don't even necessarily call it trauma. I just call it a shitty childhood. So I don't even use the word, and it would actually apply to someone like me.
Well, yeah, and I would add a couple points that there's this movement that I've seen in the field of therapy, mental health, to make this distinction between, well, there's small traumas and there's big traumas. Well, okay, if trauma can be something that's both little and big in significance, then one, what does the word mean? Two, I'm not going to say someone that was, insulted a whole bunch is the same as a client who got raped. I need to treat them differently. But also, who was it? I think it might have been Bruno. Someone made the point about like the victimhood thing with trauma. And I think that's such a good point. Like trauma is very externalizing, because on the whole, we don't really perpetrate trauma on ourselves. It's thought of as something someone else does or something that happens to you and you're traumatized by it. So people like to go around and say, well, this is my trauma, because now they don't have to take ownership. Now it's the fault of this situation or this person or whatever. Doesn't do you any good. To the same point I made earlier about just psychological harm in general. Take some damn ownership. And some people can say, this was really traumatic for me. That's totally fine where it's applicable. But not everyone gets to do that. And thankfully so. They should be rejoicing they don't have a truly deep and horrible trauma.
Yeah. And that's weird. Like some people almost like, it's weird the way they share it.
And this actually brings it back to Aaron's theory of inventing a dragon, And if you really think about it, it just brings us back to the idea of inventing a dragon so you can slay it or you can feel like a hero or whatever. So for those, at least for those who do not have actual traumatic situations, we're discounting those who do actually have traumatic situations.
Or not just having a dragon so that you can slay it. I would argue there's having a dragon so that you can't. So that when you fail or when you don't get an opportunity, you can say, well, it's the dragon's fault. I was never going to succeed because I have a dragon. And you're never going to slay it. That's not your intention. Your intention is to use your dragon to make other people see your failings are not your own.
It's a way to divert responsibility in many ways. But speaking of that, I have to ask, when it comes to this stuff, if I were to go to a doctor, it is very possible I would be diagnosed with clinical depression. Okay? So what? So I'm diagnosed with it. What the hell are you going to do about it?
So Aaron, I would say when you get diagnosed with it, if you throw your lot in with the scientific consensus, we have the technology to essentially cure at least the symptoms of how it emerges in the mind. Because I'm plus millions are living examples of getting to a point with clinical depression where it's eating your body, like in every way you can imagine. But with the miracle of medical science, I take duloxetine once a day. That's my antidepressant. And there's a combination of exercise routine, stretching, and different things with that, plus a bit of medicinal cannabis use, and that improves my life by 100%.
Can I offer my rebuttal to that idea?
Sure. Yeah.
I know you're not suggesting that I take drugs, but the topic of drugs have definitely come up in conversations with my friends before when I have brought up how much I hate everything.
Right.
Now, this is purely my own fault. I understand this. I'm living with I'm living with my own choices. But there's something about the idea of, hey, you want to kill yourself? Here, take these drugs. I mean, I'm never going to be one to downplay the absolute brilliance of science. But there's something about the idea of solving mental problems with drugs. I'm sorry. I would rather address and kind of undo the damage that was done to my brain without having to simply rely on drugs as distractions.
So Aaron,
but that's just me.
Yeah. So it's not simply just distractions. And I think something you're wrestling with is the naturalistic fallacy here, because drugs seem like they're unnatural or something, but they're as natural as the cornflakes that you're eating or the vector cereal that you're eating to get your B12 count. your daily B12 count. It's like
I mean, fair enough. That's true.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think what gets in the way a lot with doctors, that they have to struggle with patients a lot, is the naturalistic fallacy of people will go in and people will be so scared of the term like antidepressant or something, and they'll be like, oh, do you have anything more, do you have a more natural approach? And they're like, well, what do you mean? Like, this is like, here are the ingredients, these are the things that have been taken out of nature and have been combined to work on the GABA inhibitors in your brain, and la-di-da, and essentially bringing your parasympathetic nervous system up into balance with your sympathetic nervous system is what's going on. So it's just, we're using the elements available to us to come up with some ways to not make it's not the cure for depression in the real sense, because it's still there, but it allows people to be in a state of mind that they can start the healing. Because sometimes a lot of the times with clinical depression, you won't be able to get there on your own, and you may spend 10, 20 years trying to get there on your own. But a lot of people end up falling into alcoholism or trying to self-medicate in different ways. And then they're like, on one hand, they'll be saying, I've never taken antidepressant, and they're drinking a gallon of wine a night just to survive and be able to sleep. And you're like, that gallon of wine per night compared to the antidepressant that really has pretty minor side effects, and that's it. It's like, people just it's like there's like a distrust of like the pharmaceutical industry or something like that, and I think it's,
well, you can understand where that would come from.
Yeah, 100%, dude. I used to think the same way. Of course I did. I think we all have that emotional knee-jerk reaction to these things that we don't initially understand. I get it, man.
Well, of course, the only thing I would say in response is, fair enough, drugs are natural. I get it. But this may be a false dichotomy, but as far as my very limited knowledge take me, I see one of two things happening here. Either this sort of naturalist fallacy is propagating like wildfire, or maybe drugs aren't always the best solution, because if they're that natural and they're such a decent way of at least starting the rebuilding process in someone's head, why are we giving these to every veteran of war who has post-traumatic stress?
We are. Most of them are.
Oh.
I mean, personally?
Yeah, so most...
Great.
Yeah, so Aaron, I would say whenever a patient's going to go in and they fill out, I think anyone who's had an assessment for depression knows what I'm talking about, at least in the West, where you'll fill out your depression sheet, and then there'll be this tally. There'll be this tally, and this is real, guys. There'll be this tally, and then at the end of the tally, your GP will read it. Oh, interesting, and they'll tally it up in the end. Yeah, you are on the very high range of clinical depression, and I suspect you've been suffering from quite some time. And this stuff seems, I think a lot of people are like, well, how could they possibly fucking know that? Well, we know a lot,
Maybe more than we give each other credit for.
Definitely. People want to take away credit, like it seems impossible that we understand, what is it now, 19 fundamental particles, the up quarks, down quarks, strange quarks, like all of these different, the Planck length, like all of this stuff that just seems like those are just scientists making shit up. But it's really not, it's like the antidepressant medication, and starting off with benzodiazepines for me to slow down the panic attacks that were invading my essence, but essentially slowly killing me. But the benzodiazepine, same thing Jordan Peterson actually had a problem with. But they use those things because they're kind of an absolute stop, hit the brakes on your panic attacks. And then once that started, you get started on slowly operating antidepressants. Sometimes you'll have to go through 3 or even 4 trials before they find the right one that works for you. But once you find the one, I'm telling you, man, I didn't think that I would ever be well again, or at least able to function, like to actually do a day of work and feel like, you know, my brain wasn't going to explode as a result.
Sounds like I might need to invest in antidepressants.
Well, I would just say the only thing I would say is that if you you know, you got to get a family doctor, go see your family doctor. And if your family doctor says, you know, I think it would be very beneficial for you to try this. A lot of people's reactions, like you kind of said, or someone said, to begin with, that, you know, I've tried with my doctors, but a lot of the time it's like what they tried didn't fucking work out for me. And it's like, that will often happen. And then you just keep trying until you find something that's going to ultimately improve your well-being like tenfold, like mine did for me. But I
mean,
yeah.
shit, if antidepressants are so good,
Why do they get such a bad rap?
well, it's probably like the coronavirus vaccines.
Yeah, man, it's the same. That's a good example. Yeah, it's a good example. And you know, and I get it. People feel this weird. They feel very weird to put something in their body that they're, you know, that they don't feel is right because they're not used to having it in there. It feels invasive. It feels like they're going to change who they are. And trust me, there is a certain amount of depersonalization that you will go through typically with antidepressants, because you don't know how ill your mind is until you get a whiff of straight, like until you get a whiff of wellness. And then you're like, oh my. And I described this last time we were on the air about the first time a doctor ever put a pretty high dose of Ativan under my tongue when I was suffering from like 5 or 6 panic attacks during the day. I felt this and all of the you know, I call it just this cacophony of thinking all shut down, and I was able to, for the first time in my life perhaps, think of one thing at a time, not needing to actually be this thing that's working on 14 million different problems at the same time. It shrunk, it just silenced all that. And then I was able to just compartmentalize things in a very helpful way. And that is why people get addicted to a drug like benzodiazepines, because someone will say, like, you know, be careful with these, you can get addicted to them. But the person that's been suffering so long is just like, well, I mean, okay, fine, I get addicted to them then, but the addiction is in how well it makes you feel. It's just because after the drug wears off, you're going to start feeling that how ill your mind actually was.
That doesn't sound like a fun cycle to be stuck in. No.
Well, I think it's just the emergent quality of some of our minds. People who have hyperactive minds tend to have problems with this. I know I'm not going to out who they all are, but most people in intellectualism that I've ever met have a hard time with their parasympathetic nervous system being out of sync with their sympathetic nervous system. And they go to see a neurologist, and of course the patient always thinks there's something deeper. There's something definitely wrong. Like there's a cancer in there. There's a fucking tumor somewhere. But most of the time the neurologist is like, no, what's happening is you're feeling too much. You're thinking too much. Your things are computing you're too sympathetic to everything around you. Your parasympathetic nervous system isn't doing enough to combat the things that are stressing your body to a wild degree that are triggering actual fucking panic attacks. Like you're going into fight or flight mode when there's nothing going on. So obviously something is fucked up.
Can I spit another thesis here? That's kind of, you know, sure. I've been thinking about this a lot recently. There is, I don't even. This is a question that's. Write this shit on my tombstone, goddammit.
You got it, brother.
There is a clear, seemingly clear disconnect between the human brain, what the human brain is hardwired to expect, and what the human brain wants. Because it probably comes as no surprise that a lot, and I mean a lot, of the, not even trauma, but the stresses on our brains psychologically on a day-to-day basis come from the fact that we live in these modern societies that our brains are just not used to. We've piled so much added stress on top of all the shit we already have to worry about that is it any surprise that psychological harm is something that we're even talking about? I mean, sure, a lot of the psychological harm existed back in the day, but think about how many different things can go wrong in your life at this point.
Yeah, it's an interesting question that evolutionary psychology kind of deals with. Like, what are the pressures we are faced with now with how many things were... It's like a lot of people think that it's way worse to be in an environment where you're scraping for food and fighting off the wolves. But all of that kind of suffering seems to be relative on that psychological scale. Would you agree, Alex?
I think I understand. Can you rephrase the point?
Well,
I think I understand.
Yeah, like a relative, meaning that let's say a white collar businessman who has billions of dollars, the impact of him, let's say his net worth is $20 billion, and overnight his net worth drops in half, goes down to 10 billion. That level of psychological suffering seems like it wouldn't be as much as the person who wasn't able to find, let's say in a very poor village somewhere, a person who wasn't able to find food for their family's dinner that night, and they weren't able to put it on the table. So, I'm talking about how that varies and how relative is it, right? Because if you think of the billionaire, right? The billionaire would often take that scenario way over losing the 10 billion in his net worth.
Yeah, I would say it absolutely is.
I think the question
relative. There are certain factors that are certainly important that could be substantially traumatic for anybody, but yeah, that it's very subjective in terms of your lifestyle, your experience, your coping skills. I mean, you could have a very poorly adjusted millionaire or even a decent one who's just very particular about that money, and it's just as bad to him as what a starving person might experience. Sure.
Right.
I think it's much more of a comparison issue. Which would you prefer to be in?
I mean, I remember I watched a video of sorry.
Because yeah, I do get it. You could sort of measure the scale. Well, if you could, but you probably can't. But if you could measure the scale of suffering, you'd it's relative. The billionaire feels as if he's as if it's the end of the world. So would the guy who wasn't able to bring food to the table, but the billionaire only knows that if you sort of asked a billionaire which would you rather be in, I think he would still say, I think I'd much rather lose $10 billion than struggle for food.
Right.
It's I do understand the relativity in the experience, but I don't think because it's relative then you can equate the two, right?
Well, I don't think it's about equating on the scale of like a moral equation, but I was talking about like kind of the psychological impact on the individual, because that's obviously going to be so subjective and variable anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah,
and we have different kinds of scales in the field that are meant to evaluate or objectify these things,
right.
But there are also plenty of scales that are subjective, like the the PSSR is just one scale that's used, but it is subjectively scored. So, I mean, it's whatever numbers you choose to answer on the scale. The millionaire could get a score of 65 and the starving person could get a 40, and well, that's their score.
Right. Interesting.
I watched a video of some of the worst places to live in America. I'm going to sound like a heartless asshole, but number one, if I was heartless, I wouldn't be alive. And number two, just listen before you immediately judge. A lot of these places were places that are really dangerous, like Detroit and St. Louis. And I look at that and go, yeah, I mean, you've got that tribal survival instinct thing kicking in real hard.
Sure.
But one of them that I found that was really interesting, it's actually two of them. There's a Native American reserve in South Dakota that's complete shambles. And then there's another place, I want to say it was either in Kentucky or West Virginia, where it's like these people don't even have running water. And I watched that video and I went, you know, from a modern society perspective, yes, they are living in a fuck fire. But if you set that aside for a second and consider how human beings used to live, they've got less concerns. Yes, they have to actually go out and look for their food, but that's how human beings used to live all across the board. And there are societies to this day that still live that way. Right. So while from a modern society perspective, sure, they're living in an absolute nightmare, they're actually living in a time way simpler than what you and I are living in. They've still got roofs over their heads. They still have access to food. They may not have access to running water, but most human beings didn't have access to running water once upon a time. So the idea that they're living in what you might call a traumatic situation, I mean, you really just got to take that with a grain of salt, because it and this is the only devil's advocate moment you'll ever hear from me when everybody when the word trauma is thrown out. You can't really know truly how one person's brain works, because everybody's situation is just that little bit different, and everybody's brain processes information just that little differently. For that spoiled players that someone like me will look at and go, "You are a piece of shit. Please fall off a cliff." So I would say just bear that in mind.
Well, it's a good point though, Aaron, and it goes to some of the conversation we were having before you got here, like in terms of holding accountability for psychological harm. Like, I mean, do you think that or how does the rich person hold their butler accountable for causing them that much misery? Or, the person living in the city without running water, how do they hold their mayor, say, accountable? I mean, you fire the butler, you impeach or don't reelect the mayor or whatever, but, I mean, you're not slapping them in, I guess maybe the mayor, but you're not slapping them in prison because I'm so offended by this thing you did to me.
Just saying, nothing in life is black and white. Human beings are simply too complex for all that shit.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm brown.
Srijan.
That was
Excellent.
Great entry.
Srijan always has something for us.
Although I'm pretty sure you could say across the board, anyone who's watched a family member die because of the big Rona, that's probably pretty traumatic.
Yeah, 100%.
Unless you have just no capacity for emotion whatsoever, which I gotta say, I'm pretty close to that. It's kind of a nice place, to be honest.
I work with a grief organization. We've had an influx of participants.
Yeah, no kidding. I bet.
Emotions, the enemy of reason.
But they're also just as natural as logic and reason. So
let's be
nature's a piece of shit.
I think there's a hole in that, Bruno, in that passion is a can be a great driving force for reason. If the passion is well situated. Passion, I think, is a pretty useful emotion in general in intellectual pursuits. So I think to throw all emotion into the category of being a force for unreason, I think is a mistake. And it's a thing that I think if people have the right mechanisms working, they can actually utilize their emotionality in a way that is good for your reasonability.
Yeah, no, it's a bit of a broad statement.
Sure,
yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it's a platitude, and I hear it all the time, and I know what people are getting at. They're talking about the harmful things of trying to be reasonable when you're just furious, you know?
Yeah. That's what I was getting at.
You usually see like really good debaters and really, really intelligent people, even when they get into a debate and they just get triggered, you just start hearing like frothing butt come out of their mouth.
Like Jordan.
Sure,
Frothing
Jordan.
butt?
Frothing butt, yeah. Like Jordan and Matt at certain points. Like Jordan, when he's talking about smoking, he just really wanted to backhand Matt. Yeah, well, you can't quit smoking without, what did he say, a religious experience? And he definitely said that just because he was pissed.
Yeah.
I find it hilarious when Jordan gets pissed off, really.
Oh yeah, he gets he can get mad. But let me tell you, speaking
Listen,
of
Bucko.
Listen here, Bucko. Or when Jordan responded, Jordan made a claim in the fourth meeting at the O2 Arena between him and Sam, and someone in the audience said, "No, it doesn't," or something, and then he said, "Yes, it does." He like looked right at them, and they're just a heckler in the crowd. That's a man that cares about his fucking craft, man. It doesn't matter who's calling him out. Who said that? I love
so
that
easy
shit.
to wind the guy up. It's crazy.
And Matt Dillahunty too, man. Speaking of Matt in the same breath, it's very easy to get Matt all wound up too, and you've seen it on his call-in show if anyone that's seen it. But that is a man that cares about, you know, his craft, the message he's trying to spread, right? There's some passion there, but you just want to make sure you don't start bleeding into anger territory out of passion or frustration, because then you're going to start stubbing your toe.
Jordan is even better than Dinesh D'Souza.
You know, Dinesh, there's a guy, if you want an example, and there's a reason why Christopher Hitchens always praised Dinesh D'Souza, because Dinesh D'Souza, when it comes to debating, try to find a clip of Dinesh D'Souza getting emotional and losing it. Mm-hmm. Try to find it.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist. He is zen when it comes to being in control of his emotionality, and he has definitely scored points on people in the past because they haven't been able to do that. But it's one thing.
Can I ask you a question? Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Fugo.
Sure.
Yeah.
Who is better at word salad, Jordan Peterson or Deepak Chopra?
Who's better at word salad? Well, I mean, look, in Deepak Chopra's, he's a nice guy. All of his work shouldn't just be thrown out because it's Deepak Chopra. He has some beautiful metaphors that he applies to some aspects of reality and physics. And for someone to come in, which is pretty low-hanging fruit, and make fun of his metaphors and the way that he talks about certain aspects of physics is okay. It's fun to do, because if someone was to take what he's saying literally, then they're like, no, it's not that. But so you know, it's fun to beat up on poor Deepak all the time. But I think people can chill a little bit on that. But with Jordan,
I like Deepak.
Yeah, but with Jordan,
what is a word salad?
It's not. See. People call word salad. People will call word salad sometimes on some people when they're not directly answering the things in the way that they think is constructive. Like if Sam Harris says, "Do you actually believe in a God that manifests itself in reality and actually exists?" Well, Sam, I'm just not. I would need four. I would need 4 hours to answer that question. You know, that's the kind of stuff people call words.
That was the funniest thing I ever heard when he said, "It's going to take him 48 hours." I was like, what the fuck? And he's not joking though; he's actually serious.
No, look. This is the metaphor is powerful to Jordan. He's not fucking around when he says that this metaphor is the answer, you know, to most of our problems. He's not fucking around with that. He means it.
Okay, that brings me at ease because, you know, I'm glad that he actually believed the things he's saying, you know?
Well, yeah, he's not. Some people will say Jordan Peterson's a shyster, and it's like, well. He's not. Read his books. He's been writing about and talking about this stuff for a very long time. There's not like he blew up in popularity because he happened to be getting popular at a time where people really needed someone like him to be out there, you know, talking about free speech and whatnot. Because so many people are feeling disenfranchised. But when it comes to matters of clinical psychology, there's no word salad. Jordan Peterson has his way of describing things, and I call him a thought pretzel thinker and a thought pretzel communicator. But it's and like if you're someone that's used to the Sam Harris variety of authored thinking and authored speaking, then you're going to have a real fucking hard time if you're unable to tear away your own presuppositions of how information ought to be delivered. If you don't do that before you switch from Sam Harris to Jordan Peterson, you're going to find yourself with a earful of shit because you're like, why didn't he just say what is?
Yeah,
well, it's not.
I'm gonna try to do that next time. I'm gonna go back and rewatch with that.
I think you should give it another shot because there's, you know, Jordan's a very, very intelligent man. He's a wealth of knowledge. He's a wealth of knowledge in the clinical psychological realm. His self-authoring suite is amazing. Something I always promote. So yeah, you know, give him a shot. He's a lot of people want to throw Jordan to the wayside because they think he's like some kind of radical white supremacist or something, but there's no evidence for that. Jordan, as far as I can tell, Jordan's one of the most sweet person, or he's one of the most sweet people I've ever had the privilege of being around. He's not any of these things people say he is.
No, I fucking love Jordan.
Who was the least sweet?
Sorry?
Who was the least sweet?
Jordan.
No, who is the least sweet?
Oh, the least sweet.
Oh. No, I'm just playing. Don't answer that. Don't answer that.
I mean, I was prepared to give an answer. Look, here's what I'll say about that. In a lot of ways, Matt Dillahunty in private is a very, very sweet, caring guy. But the way he engages in the war of ideas, that's why when I introduce Matt at my events, I say, now entering the ring, the warrior for reason, Matt Dillahunty. It's like, this is a guy that's coming out there with like his Texas boots, his Texas cowboy boots on with his blue jeans, and he's ready to, toss ideological arms with someone, throw fists.
So was Aaron Ra.
Yeah, and Aaron Ra is kind of like that too. I like Aaron Ra. He's a cool guy, and he's a wealth of knowledge.
I looked at Aaron Ra the first time and went, "How the hell is this guy not in like the heaviest, like the most dense of metal bands?"
Yeah, you find actually in the atheist community, you find a lot of those guys that kind of look like the stereotypical devil of what, like if a Christian was to show you a picture of what a devil looks like they would give you a picture of something that looks like Aaron Ra.
I mean, I'm a goth, so I don't know if I'm probably not really helping the case, but hey, whatever. So
I play a
call you
crew.
Trevor. That's a mistake. Travis, I got a question for you.
Yeah,
because to bring it back to the subject at hand just for a moment, because yes, I am that guy. Go fuck yourself. I think there are certain kinds of psychological now, because of course in my head I'm going, all right, well shit, if antidepressants are the way of the future, let's roll that shit out like candy. No, but I do think that humans are complex beings. We all know that, and I think that there are antidepressants are natural, fair enough, but I do think that there may be other ways that we can help people deal with trauma.
There are,
like actual trauma that
hundreds
because
of.
I go back to all those videos I've seen of people who get over their fear of spiders, or at least try to get over their fear of spiders by holding a thick ass tarantula. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Or the ones that are the most relevant to what I've been looking up lately. I'll never get in an airplane because I've seen too many videos of the CVRs of pilots whose nose into the ground at 700 miles an hour. I've seen too many pictures of what happens when you crash into the ground at 700 miles an hour. And I watched the video of people down in Arizona who said, right, we are going to help you get over your fear of flying by putting you in a plane. And in the 3 cases I saw, it was 66% effective. Now, I wonder if it is legitimate to say that there is a type of trauma that, or maybe it's not even trauma is not the right word, but a type of psychological harm that comes from the things that you haven't experienced yet, but for some reason the self-preservation software in your brain kind of knows are just a bad idea. Would you consider those to be trauma? I consider phobias to be their own form of psychological harm. Because a lot of the time they do come from experiences that you have had that were traumatic, but a lot of the time they come from fears that you have that you haven't experienced. So what are your thoughts on that?
What do you think, Alex?
So, oh gosh. Yes, phobias are their own kind of harm separate from trauma. And yes, you can have a phobia of something that you're not familiar with, but have just some general aversion to. I guess I don't know what the full point was. I mean, any of those are curable through various means with relatively good efficacy.
Could it, well, my point was, could it be used for something like me, where I legitimately have a distrust in other African Americans and in women because of all the because of all the experiences that I've dealt with? Is there a way that you can kind of tie that kind of? I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna be brutally honest.
I think
who I am.
I think Fuego is a little bit new here. He's probably not used to people just sharing their ideas out loud without the us needing to call foul.
So basically what I'm trying to ask is there a way that, other than simply relying on antidepressants, is there a way that I could start to work on that kind of trauma in this way of?
Well, think of all the there are many methods that and I'll let Alex go after this, but there are many methods that are either approached before antidepressants are considered. Like a good doctor is going to take into consideration your diet, your sleep. Sleep's a big one, right, Alex?
Oh,
it's like everything. But yeah, sorry, go ahead, Alex. You're the expert.
So, I mean, to basically answer your question, yes, absolutely. And there are a lot of different therapies out there that are specific to phobia or are specific to trauma. So some people will use, if you guys have heard of CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy, there's a version of that that's designated for traumatic experiences. There's another form designated for phobia. Typically, the way phobias are treated, what you described earlier about holding a spider, that's referred to as exposure therapy, exposing yourself to the thing you're afraid of. And you can do the same thing with anything. It could be groups of people. You don't even have to be near those people. You could just do it in your head. There's another version for more severe things like traumas that's called prolonged exposure, which shows a lot of good efficacy. People talk about EMDR. There's a rewind technique. whole bunch of them. I could go on for a long time about all the different ways we do it. But none of those require of any kind.
I see.
I think Jordan talks about something similar to that, where he in his book where he sort of he treated the woman who was afraid of elevators, I think. I'm not too sure if it's elevators, but it was essentially the same premise, which was gradual exposure to the thing, which is beard, for example. But I don't think that would work for me because I'm afraid of swimming. You know, black people don't swim. So
Wait.
Speak for yourself.
Oh, come on, man.
We can do exposure with
Fuego.
I'm
Wait,
just kidding,
Fuego was trying to get in there. What's that, Fuego?
My thing is, with phobias, right? Phobias are irrational fear, right? I think it's perfectly rational to be afraid of flying. That's my take.
Of flying?
I think it's perfectly rational to be afraid of flying.
Interesting. Yeah.
Hold on a second.
I mean, I would generally. There's a few things there, right? It's like there is a statistic that exists, be it quite low that you could crash in a plane. It becomes irrational if you are applying more fear to that thing when, say, you apply way less to your vehicle when you have way higher chances of getting in an accident in your vehicle, right?
I'm safe because I don't drive for that very same reason. I'm consistent.
Also, Travis, I feel like you're speaking directly to me when you say that, because I've had friends tell me, because for my birthday, I'd love to fly to LA and go to a goth bar and finally meet my people. But I'm not going to do it because fuck planes.
That's right.
The thing. People say, oh, well, you're 100,000 times more likely to die in a car accident. And I'm like, you're absolutely 100% correct. But here's the difference. In that car or in this truck that I'm driving that I risk my life every day to drive, guess what? I'm the one in control.
Sure, yeah.
That's right. That's my issue as well. I don't trust anybody else to drive me in this guy.
I think that I watched a grade A under A video just today talking about phobias and how he takes issue with that idea of them being irrational because he has a fear of spiders. Well, actually, he has a fear of spiders. He just doesn't like them. The thing is, when I think of something like a phobia, 9 times out of 9, it's usually something that would kill you. A fear of spiders, a fear of heights, which is technically just a fear of falling, a fear of airplanes, confined spaces. These are all things that, well, maybe not the confined spaces, but I get that one. Most of these things are things that would kill you. So really, in that case, phobias are typically just your brain's way of sort of putting a face to the name of self-preservation.
Sure.
There's nothing irrational about trying to keep yourself alive.
That's right.
But
I still fly in planes, though.
There's good rationale for taking the word irrational out of the equation because, frankly, from a clinical perspective, like what we can do to treat things, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're afraid of, spiders or doorknobs. We can treat it the same way, whether it's irrational or not. I mean, just like some people will, especially people who have had like a panic attack or something, will come into therapy legitimately with a fear that they're going to die. Well, we can deal with that too, and that's by no means irrational. We're all going to do it. So, yeah. So
if you're
doesn't
afraid of doorknobs, by the way, please seek help. just get help, please.
I needed an example of something typically benign, and that's what's in my field of vision.
I have a fear of doorknobs. I don't know what to tell you at that point.
Just tell him you're fucked.
Yeah, like that's like saying you have a fear of the sun. I don't know what to tell you.
But
I have a fear of photosynthesis.
I think the worst one though is the fear of itself. That one sucks, and I get that one. What do you say to someone who has a fear of fear itself? That's like meta.
So, like a fear of the unknown, is it, or just a fear of fear?
I think those can be two totally different things. That they can be a lot of the time, but I think fear of the unknown is more like why you have kids that are afraid of the dark, because our brains are like pre-wired to say, I don't know what's out there. This is bad. Even when you're in your room in your house, your brain still says it's dark and I don't know what's coming.
Yeah.
That can kind of be considered the fear of the unknown, whereas the fear of fear itself is like, man, being afraid sucks.
Well, and at a certain level of intensity, and this isn't so much fear of fear as fear of panic, but there is a specific condition where someone actually fears the feeling of panic and fear so much that becomes its own problem.
It's like the way that I saw this was somebody who was convicted of a heinous crime, was about to be executed via firing squad, and he was so afraid of the idea of being holed up like Swiss cheese that he basically had a heart attack and died. I imagine that's kind of what you're talking about.
Not
he
quite
did
the same.
Really horrible. Don't feel
but
too bad
it can
for him,
happen.
okay?
I don't wish death on nobody. You're not coming back from that shit.
No, there isn't.
Am I allowed to curse?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
Yep.
We're not PG around this bitch. God damn it.
I'm just making sure. I mean, somebody was saying some stuff earlier. Kind of like I like to push your buttons a little. Okay, that's me as a person.
Hey, that's I like.
Why is it you're so distrustful of black people?
Because I was bullied by them my entire childhood.
Not all black people bully.
No, well, not all bees want to sting you, but is that going to stop you from swatting it away?
Yes, I'm not gonna just hit a bee.
Okay.
No, I think honestly, I think I understand your fear, Aaron. When I was 18, when long story short, I got arrested because this girl lied. I raped her, right? So for the first 2 weeks as an 18-year-old, I was afraid of women. So I could not talk to any sort of girl, like any sort of lady who sort of passes me by, I'd fucking freeze. So I can definitely sort of understand why you feel that way.
And now here's an interesting question I'd like to ask Fuego. Fuego, let's say hypothetically that Aaron and Bruno were both black. Would that change anything for how you think about this?
Oh, no. I don't know what skin color they were, and it didn't matter to me.
So it doesn't matter. Okay, good. I think that's good.
I didn't know what skin color they were.
Right, and I would suggest that it doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah.
Or at least it shouldn't matter.
It shouldn't.
I was just more curious as to find out why you have an irrational fear of black people.
Well,
Not
do you
irrational
think?
At all.
Yeah, I think it's I would say it's irrational to fear an entire race, because the variation from individual to individual is greater than any variation between races. So basically, what that tells you is that each individual is is an individual. They're not really defined by their race, even though they might happen to be of that particular race.
Political correctness.
I think it's perfectly rational, actually. I think it's perfectly rational to be afraid of an entire race or an entire gender. It's a heuristic that your brain is sort of brought up to protect you from whatever's happened, right?
Yeah.
So it's a rational move.
It's not. I don't think it's rational, because you think you're presupposing that race has something to do with what happened to you, or why you have a fear.
No.
Sure.
I would say no. I would say you're presupposing that.
Because what?
These kind of
let me tell you,
people-
Bruno. The thing you are going to have to demonstrate is that there is something about the skin color, about the race, that is determining the behavior that you are afraid of. And unfortunately, that's just not the case. It's not an indicator of that.
Like I'm not trying
You
to.
just met shitty black people.
Yeah.
Very possible.
But listen, political correctness aside, you just move to keep yourself safe, my brother. You just move to keep yourself safe. I'm well aware of the dangers as well.
It's so trying to maybe help clarify this in things a little bit. I mean, heuristics can certainly be very faulty, and there's so a lot of times when we talk about like a fear of a group of people, the way I would describe what's really going on there is there's an association between whatever happened that you dislike and someone of that group, and then you generalize to other members of the group. And we might say it's fear of, say, black people, and you could say that. I'm not going to get hung up on the language of it, but technically it's fear of whatever it is that keeps happening when you're around black people, that you've developed this association.
Right.
I mean, to go with Aaron's case, if I may, like as a normal human being, he does not want to be abused by other people. Coincidentally, they have historically been black.
Right. So yeah, and then what I would say is, like, when you're talking about a group so vast, and we actually have the statistical data to show the difference between individuals within races are far grander than the differences between races, that should just tell you that you ought to judge people by the content of their character and not the color of their skin.
Yeah,
and that's why
right,
it's.
But my
No,
point
he's right. But the reality of the situation is sometimes you just don't want to take that chance. You don't want to give people an opportunity to backdoor you.
But the point is you're not mitigating anything with, unless you're able to demonstrate that the activity or the thing that Alex was talking about, the thing you're seeking to avoid, has anything to do with the color of someone's skin or the race. But we know in those particular categories, it's just there is no correlation there. Like the race, like you can have people that are from a community with solid moral foundations who happen to be black with regards to being law-abiding citizens, but then you can find another circle of black people that will be on the opposite side of the spectrum. Now, if you were to say, here's a different one. If you were to say, this person walking towards me at night looks like a gangster, and not just because, let's just say, for example, not just because they're black, but because they're wearing this really thick gold chain around their neck. I can see what
Sagging
looks
pants,
to be,
backwards cap.
I can see what looks to be a gun in a gun holster. Even if you're in a gun carrying place, you might say, okay, the combination of the chain and the gun tells me that, I should cross the street and walk on the other side. But it's, I just want people to be careful. I think it's a mistake, and I think it is actually irrational. And I think the left are the deepest perpetrators of this, actually, to apply any kind of colloquial group attribution when it comes to culture to an entire race. I just think it's a mistake.
Yeah,
I hate
I
to tell
think
you
so
this,
too.
but
I do support that. Like, my point of contention is where you say it's irrational. I don't think it's irrational, because if I'm going to use Aaron again, Aaron, if you do permit me, that'd be perfect.
no, please just use and abuse me. Why the hell not?
No, so Travis, think about it this way, right? So if you have constantly the first encounter, whatever bullying Aaron experience was from black people, the second time black people, and every time after the second time has been black people.
Sure.
It then follows that rationally, as a child, he would say, these groups of people tend to behave this way because other groups of people have not behaved that way.
So that's
right.
So that's a failure in skepticism.
It's not necessarily.
Sure.
I think it's deduction, really, because you're deducing from your experience, or actually inferring, not deduction, inferring from your experience that these groups of people, this group of people act this particular way towards me, hence, and that's all I've ever experienced, hence I should avoid them. I think it's a rational sort of premise.
No, what it is, it's survival. I think you're mixing up rational and survival. We can point to why this survival mechanism will feel like it makes sense to do that, but when we actually do the scientific, when we get scientific with this and we look at the actual statistical realities of human behavior, of racial groups and how they compare, we actually find that it doesn't have anything to do with the race, even though it felt like that way from a survival perspective. It didn't have anything to do with the race, but it had to do with the cultural pockets that you found yourself in.
Yeah, and I support you 100%, thumbs up.
Yeah.
It doesn't have anything to do with the race, but
it's the culture.
So it's irrational. I know you're having a problem with the rational part, but I'm just saying, if you replaced rationale, like someone could say, this is my rationale. It was because these are the people that I've been around. And then I thought that it was rational to go into, and really the rationale was wrong, because there's a presupposition there to think that, color was a good way to determine the danger. Now, from a survival perspective, you can find evolutionary justification for that, but what you will not find is a good rationale, a sound rationale.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
My thing is, I disagree with him. I disagree, but I'm okay with it. I don't have an issue, honestly. I'm not offended by what he's saying as a black person myself.
Well, I'm black too,
really
so
understand.
I mean, not really.
I understand.
And I'm black
I'm not offended, I understand. I disagree, but I understand. I'm not mad at you at all.
So no,
some people just rather be safe than sorry. Everybody has a different heart and a different mind and a different tolerance to things.
Yeah. No, for me, it's not. I'm not even attributing the characteristics of his experience to the ethnic group. I'm only saying it's. All right, do you know what? I'm just going to think about this much more because
yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people have tried to, make have tried to demonstrate, and you'll get a lot of people who call themselves race realists who will try to demonstrate some kind of intrinsic thing in black people that is more common than the other when it comes to violence and things like that. But every time we look at these studies, we see that, like I said before, and Richard Dawkins talks about this, that there's more variation between individual human beings from individual to individual than any kind of measurable, real occurrence that is going to happen between racial groups. So what I think would be rational in those situations is if one was to say, let's say it has been 100% males that have been violent towards you. Now that's another massive group. So how do we narrow this down? Well, we create more information. What were some of the defining characteristics that were similar amongst these people who caused me harm? Was it a way they walked? Was it something they called me? Was it the tone of their voice?
I think you're getting into the specifics, which from my perspective, I think may be irrelevant, because do you know what? We're just going to disengage the race and let's use men. Say, for example, as a man, ever since I was a kid, this is not real. Since I was a child, I've only experienced violence from men. Hence, I developed a fear from men, right? Because I've sort of developed a heuristic that creates a positive correlation between violence and men, right?
Yeah.
You then call that irrational.
Yes. Yeah. So so the rationale there, if we put it, let's take the ration, let's put it into an argument, put it into a logical premise, like a formal argument. Your premise would be what? I've
experienced experienced violence from men.
Yeah.
I've experienced violence. The violence were from 100% of the violence were from men. Hence, all men are violent.
It doesn't sound rational, does it? So I think,
doesn't sound okay. Yeah. It doesn't sound rational. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I think a really good trick, and I should have went there. Earlier, but forming this in a logical formation, you can start seeing it. And this is what I do to people when they misread and misinterpret statistics when it comes to like black crime or something. They just see racism and they presuppose racism, but when really there's it tends not to be the case. So at least as far as what hasn't been demonstrated. So
yeah, it's not rational, but it's not rational. I do agree.
But let me tell you, there's the reason why this emerges and the reason why it feels rational is because our survival instincts and our survival mechanisms are wired that way. Like to try and put together in the moment the best information that we can, but in the moment we're not putting together the logical formation and to come up with a reason why this is kind of crappy,
Yeah.
Well, if I can be that guy, I mean, I would also say, don't discount the process. And I'm maybe a little biased because that's my job, but it's perfectly fine for someone to be in a state of mind where they're like, okay, so men have always been, problematic for me. I'm going to go out of my way to avoid them. I recognize that that's not true, and I recognize that I'm overgeneralizing, but until I can get myself to a point where I feel whatever you want to call it, I will continue to make this overgeneralizing. If you have some realization you're doing it, that's progress enough, and I get that stage is necessary.
Yeah, totally, man. And a lot of people won't take the time. Like, let's say here's a real world example. You're a woman and you've recently been raped for the third time in your life by another man. Your survival mechanisms are not going to have you feeling comfortable for the most part. I would say, I'm sure there are outliers in this, but for the most part, you're not going to feel that comfortable being around men. Or at least, maybe some close members of your family. But there is some ways that this might manifest itself irrationally from a logical perspective. But the process, like Alex is saying, it can be very important. So, yeah, I think that's...
Also, to bring this... to add my 2 cents in here, since a lot of this stemmed from me opening my big mouth.
But we're glad you did, Aaron.
Well, I'm glad you're glad. My dissent towards black people, I don't feel bad about it. I know not all black people are the gangsters I was bullied by my entire childhood. But I have a general distrust in people. It's why I haven't made a new friend in almost 8 years. I just don't trust people.
Right.
I don't trust myself. I don't trust other people. But my thing is, I'll give you another perfect example. I fucking hate kids. Like, if you're less than 28, don't fucking talk to me. I hate you.
Okay, I won't.
I'll leave.
But here's the thing, though.
I'm 22, so I'd leave.
The thing is, though, the reason I don't feel bad for hating kids, who the hell am I hurting? I'm not having kids. I don't go around looking at little kids and say, I fucking hate you. I stay away from them. So who the hell am I hurting by hating kids? And who the hell am I hurting by kind of hating black people? Who am I hurting?
Oh, wow.
No one. So
Well,
Sorry, not sorry.
You know, I guess what I would suggest there is that I don't find hate to be a very useful thing.
Yeah.
Almost always. I think it will play against you, and I think if there's a way for you to replace hate with care, this is usually my advice for anyone that's wrestling with hate, and not some fake version of care, but legitimate care. Like it's like because when you start caring about someone, you just fundamentally can't hate them. It's not within you. So I would say like it might improve your well-being to actually start, you know, you might say you hate black people. I would say I would care for black people, just like you would care for white people or any people, and that might seem like, you know, I'm telling you to like care for the thing that you detest, and I am.
I don't mean to, jump in or even make I don't want to give you any advice, but I could tell that that's eating up at you. And I truly believe it's not going to go away until you face at least one of them again. And at least, like, get what you have to get off of your chest.
Let me build up
I'm
the
pretty
courage
sure
to
you're
finally
gonna
go and
feel
talk
that.
to another black person.
Oh my.
Jeez.
No, I
Wait, so
mean, I'm talking. Okay.
You haven't. I'm just curious. When was the last time you spoke to a black person?
I mean, I have a black friend, a female black friend. I haven't. I talk to other truck drivers who are African American all the time, but of course, we have something in common. I'm not just going to strike up a conversation with a black person. I mean, I'm not going to strike up a conversation with really anybody, but I'm much more comfortable doing that with a white person than a black person. So it's been a very long time since the last time I just struck up a conversation with a black person.
Well, perhaps we give Aaron a bit of a break here instead of all piling on him.
Yeah.
But
But
I do want to comment on that last part. I wouldn't either. I mean, I don't talk to people I don't know generally.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're not going to talk to me if we meet? Oh.
Well, I know you now.
I'm just saying, like, I know it's weighing heavy on your heart. I think it's not gonna go anywhere until you actually talk to the people that did that shit to you. It's really not gonna go anywhere. It's gonna eat up at you for the rest of your life.
Ooh. The therapist in me feels weird about that, but
yeah.
I'll leave it be.
I mean, if you're telling me that I should,
Well,
I should confront the people who bullied me my entire childhood, they don't feel any. They don't give a shit. So what? How's that gonna help?
No, it's not about them. It's about you.
Yeah, I would say take what you're hearing with a grain of salt when it comes to advice here, and when it comes to dealing with your, there's a reason why Alex perked up and said, my therapist side is kind of just that kind of sparked something weird in
my
me.
therapist senses are tingling.
Yeah. Well, I would. People are. Oh shit! I didn't realize. Oh yeah, of course he can do that. Oh, I'm playing chess too, by the way. Fuck. I just got fucked.
But if you ever do, DM me and tell me how it went.
Don't hold your breath. That's all I have to say.
Oh my god.
Being honest.
Oh my god.
I'm just being honest.
Well, he said that because he already started holding his breath.
Oh well.
I said, I'm really not mad at you.
This is why I said at the beginning I feel like I'm qualified to speak on psychological harm, because I've had quite a bit of it done to me. And I'll say this much: I do believe that dreams are a powerful tool. Now, I believe that certain people, we don't have dreams as much as others, because some people's brains aren't nearly as sort of all over the goddamn place. I just so happen to be a person with a very vivid imagination, so it's very rare that I ever have a night where I don't dream about some stupid shit. I can't tell you how many awful dreams I've had about just general shit, like being the butt of jokes in my own fucking dreams, people are being assholes to me, and it's affecting me in ways that I have no control over. Get fist fights with my parents, or being in a place where I see like run-down apartments and knowing my life is in danger. There may be gangsters around, because that's all I've ever seen is dilapidated buildings, the desolate third world country-looking neighborhoods in America. What's the general population of places like that? African Americans. So clearly, the psychological harm that I've dealt with, that I haven't dealt with honestly in years, clearly hasn't gone anywhere. Psychological harm fucking sucks.
Some of the
Obvious point
things
is
you
obvious,
just
I know.
listed there, I've been through as well. Away.
Have we heard from Doc yet?
Big Doc is
I was
Shreveport.
Oh yeah, right.
I was battling with depression for some years,
Oh yeah.
and when I this is just my experience, but the moment I started working out, I just felt better. Honestly, yeah, that's what it did for me.
Nobody cares. Go kill yourself.
Srijan.
Oh,
Exactly.
Oh, I was
Did
not
you
being
just-
serious. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Yeah, you might want to qualify that when you make a joke like that.
I was trying to pull that Slavok Zizek one. Have you seen that one?
The what?
Like,
oh,
it's very contrary to Jordan Peterson, right? So Slavok Zizek in an interview, when
okay.
when he starts talking about stuff like he said that people ask me about personal shit and stuff like that, and I'm like, I don't give a shit. Go kill yourself.
Whoa.
That's
Yeah, that
very
guy's
contrary to
he's
Peterson.
very direct.
Pangburn, I think you've got. Oh, sorry, no. I thought you were white. White's got checkmate on their next move.
I know. No, it's not the. No. I have my little defense here.
Excuses.
I can't wait till Friday.
well,
I know
that's
that was
random.
random. No, I just seen it. You're gonna have something on the physics of climate change. I just seen it.
Yeah,
On Friday?
Yeah. Please do join us. Lawrence Krauss.
Yeah, I can't
Lawrence
wait
Krauss will
for
be
that.
here. So
African American, Canadian.
Yo.
So make sure you guys sign up.
Jamaican.
pang-burn.com/subscription. You have to be a website subscriber to attend the Q&A, but it's going to be a lot of fun, really hot. I'm in early talks of planning the world tour for Lawrence Krauss for this book. It's going to be a mission to get the data out there, and one thing I really love about this book that Krauss put together is that it's just a delivery of the data, and people can I'm going to run out of time, but it's just a delivery of the data, not through a political lens. So if you've been waiting for a book from a physicist talking about climate change, this is the one you want. There's nothing political in the book. It's just giving you the data. But I think some planning needs to occur, and there needs to be actual steps being taken, because by as soon as 2050, we're going to have to start either building up some of these cities, building away, migration, building on top of water surfaces, like all of this stuff we have to be ready for. So
Climate change was the original source of a lot of my psychological harm. When I found out, because my big thing is I'm a huge advocate for not being punished for shit that's outside of your control. So when I found out in physics class back in high school, hey, by the way, Mother Nature's mad that we keep punching her in the face, and she's gonna punch back in your lifetime. I'm like, great. I'm 16 years old, and I'm already being told that my future is fucked because some dumb assholes back in the day didn't stop to think, hey, maybe we should consider what putting all this shit in the atmosphere might do to the atmosphere. Thanks. That was the source of my original hatred towards people.
In their defense, nobody has really stopped even till this day.
No, they haven't.
People
It
can't
gets into-
see
it gets
further
into that
than their
whole-
noses.
It gets into that whole caveman brain versus logical brain problem with
Mhm.
humanity, where one part of
This
us
is
says
why-
this is a problem, and the other one says if it's not a danger that's right in front of my face, I don't give two fucks.
Exactly. I mean, this is why I've given up on humanity.
I've ran out of time. Fuck.
Same. Same.
happened?
I gave.
I ran
No,
out of
honestly,
time
I
a
have.
long time
I
ago.
have.
in my chess match. I was bullshitting
I
too.
gave
do.
up on humanity a long time ago. You're not the
Yeah.
only one. And then I made the mistake of getting into politics and letting the left lead me
You
to
did
believe
what?
that everything was. I made the mistake a couple of years ago of getting into politics and letting the progressive left trick me into believing that everything about life was a dumpster fire.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I've completely given up on humanity.
I just try to live my best life with the people that love me, and that's it. That's it.
Like it's absolutely crazy, right? 50, 60 years ago, we used to believe that cigarettes would do us good rather than harm. There were literal ads about how cigarettes will change your life.
Weed
They
was
didn't show
illegal.
how, like, it's even in the 60s and 70s, we had televisions and stuff like that. Still, they were showing ads about how cigarettes were the greatest thing that could happen to human beings. Like, they were the steroids without any side effects.
Yeah.
There are people today who think the Earth is flat.
Yeah,
Yes, that is
it's
true.
actually that is an
Like, is it that surprising?
No,
I think-
not in my country.
It's
No.
I think it's it just shows you how educated people are, it's incredible. The Greeks discovered this a very long time ago with a well. And we
Yeah.
and
Sorry.
people can't seem to fucking get it, it doesn't even make sense. Physics.
Like, it
Um,
does
You
not
take for
make sense, but
granted-
it's
Well,
very
take for
rational to
granted
believe
that-
it.
uh,
You
The
take for
flat
granted
Earth.
that people have an understanding of physics like you.
yeah, tab where we're doing yeah, I'm gonna thank you so much. Thanks to all of you who were engaging in the chat. Have joined us on Discord. If you haven't, I've 5 p.m. Pacific time, and we're going to be talking. And I had read and or listen to thinking about it as you're reading this book, because it is. But one thing you'll really love about this book is that it's a very straightforward way by Lawrence Krauss. Gives us some timelines and to deal with, right? So it's going to be deeply affected by the heat. The data is the scientific consensus. It's the global scientific reality. Blur out all, build cities up. There's a lot of things we can do. This is a huge plots of space. We have lots. The Q&A. Don't miss.